yet I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
Welcome to Against the Grain, where curiosity leads the way.
Jonathan, so good to see you. How are you doing?
Very well, very well. A little hot here in Texas, but doing well.
It's a little hot there in Texas. I bet it is. Yeah, absolutely. It's not hot. It's raining here. We've got the typical British summertime of grey clouds and rain at the moment. So yeah, it's happening. I haven't seen you over here for a while.
No, I didn't. I haven't been back since COVID. That stopped, and I haven't really been traveling that much. I'm retired now, so I'm just kind of staying. I have a place up at Canyon Lake, which used to be, but we're way down. We're in drought now, and so the lake is pretty low, and I'm back and forth between San Antonio and the hill country. But that's most of my travel.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. So that's it. What else you been up to? Any sort of research or anything that you're working on at the moment?
Well, yeah. I'm following the formations. I mean, there have been some really nice formations, two of them in France too this year. So I mean, but it's the larger thing I think that's going on. I mean, this is all part and parcel of something, that we're moving into the planet, and involve listening to the Ubiquity University and the New Paradigm Institute, and just following a lot online, which is marvelous. I have a new iPad Pro, and then I also got those new goggles.
You got some of those.
Pros.
Did you?
So,
how are you finding that?
Good, really good. But there's fun. It's all the technology is wonderful, but it's just having the time. It's just because you go into another space really, and time, and it's just that's the thing is it's the amount, the time you want to spend in that state of consciousness with watching all these
you
stuff.
I think I've avoided sort of like being a gamer. I've got friends my age who are very much into gaming, and they all talk about how much of a time warp they go into. They sort of switch it on when they get home from work, and then it's 2 a.m. So and I still very much like to walk around in the woods and be in the real reality as much as I can.
Well, here we're back and forth into the pool a lot. I mean, because that's the pool and the air conditioning. I mean, and under a fan, and so it's. But I'm located at the same parallel as the pyramids.
Right.
We're that far south in San Antonio, Texas, and so I really have to kind of shift my day, my living cycle, where I'll get up at 3 or 4 in the morning and spend a lot of time then, but then and then siesta.
Right.
Siesta is really required. You can't do any work outside from 12, 1 o'clock until the sun starts to set, 6, 7.
Yeah.
It's a very different atmosphere and climate here, but it's what it is, and so it's.
Yeah, when I left Mexico, I went to Puerto Vallarta for a week, and it was like 42 to 45 degrees, and after 10:30 in the morning, that was it. You couldn't. Yeah. You run for the AC. It's just too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we've known each other a long time. I was looking through some old photos. There's a great photo. I'm going to bring it up for the guests. There's a great photo of you and I outside the Copacabana in Rio some years ago when we were there doing a lecture tour.
Yeah.
You've been around the circles for a while. When did you first come over to?
Well, the first time was 2003. Okay. I had a fellowship to Schumacher College. That's where I kind of first found out. Actually, the way that I found out about the whole phenomenon of crop circles was actually during the week of my father's funeral. In 2002. He passed away, had a heart, and during the week there, the movie Signs came out.
Okay.
And I was there with my brother, and we had some time, and we all went to see Signs, and that's when I first heard about the phenomena of what's this crop, but I didn't think much of it. But then later I'd been doing some seminars in Germany and on sound in the Liquid Sound Temple at Bad Sulza near Weimar, Germany, and while doing that and researching, I came across Freddie Silva's book,
Okay.
which was, that his first book that came out that year. And because he was talking about sound, and we were listening to sound, we were listening to the Berlin Philharmonic underwater and this liquid sound, and so I got very interested in sound. And then that year, then I said, Props, I need to go, and so 2003, 2004 is when I met John Michel, and I was on a PowerPoint tour, and I'm trying to think who else. John Michel was there, and Alan
Brown.
Alan Brown, yeah. And so that's my. So that's 20. What how many years is that now?
20 years ago.
Yeah,
21 years. Yeah, 2003. Yeah, wow.
So that's kind of how I got into, and then I went every year up until 2020.
Yeah.
And then,
yeah, you became a regular fixture really in those sort of peak months of sort of July, August time, didn't you?
Yeah, and then met Karen and y'all, and
yeah. And so Freddie Silva's book talked about the connection with sound. What was that with regards to Simon? It's a long time since I've read his book. Secrets in the Fields you're talking about, I think, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
So what was he on about? Cymatics and some other connections to the frozen music?
Yeah, and then the harmonics and the vibration and different tunes, because in this liquid sound temple in Germany, we would tone different. It was a deep sleep, big dreams. I'm very interested in dreams. That's my background, psychoanalytic, trained at the Jung Institute in Zurich as well here in the United States, and so I've always been interested in dream work and sleep and dream incubation, but the sound would be the harmonics, and that's, but then I was wondering, what are these patterns in the field and the sacred geometry in it, and it just kind of went from there.
And so, like being Jungian trained, you'd obviously had the whole bit about his work with mandalas and the connection to the unconscious and the archetypal nature of all that sort of stuff. So did you immediately see the connection with that and the formations? Did you come to just find out if they were genuine or initially, and then take it from there? What happened?
Yeah, well, that of course was at the time, is it hoax? Is it real? That was always kind of out and about in the fields. But I was seeing them as some form of symbol. They're symbolic. There's something going on here. There must be message in it. So I never really got caught up into trying to authenticate them. I mean, Nancy Talbot, there was some. Different people were doing that kind of research. What was his name? Levengood.
Yeah, with the scientific stuff. Yeah.
But then what happened actually in 2004 and 2005 here in the United States, we had some major formations happen at the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. Jeff Wilson was at the time, and Jeff has a great site that ICCRA.org, Independent Crop Circle Research. Really, Jeff knows more about crop circles than anybody I know in the United States. And so I went up there, and we had a couple of small conferences, and so I got involved through looking and visiting the formations here in the United States as well. But I hadn't really found out about those until after I had that first and second year in England, and then during that process, I had several major dreams that kind of said, hey, pay attention to this. So that was part of that. But I've always seen it as some form of manifestation of the unconscious.
And I was going to ask you, first of all, I'll lead on to that question. I was going to ask you, comparatively, I've never been into a circle in the States. I've been in one in Holland. Predominantly my experiences of UK crop circles, a large number of them, as you know. When you've been in a large number of crop circles in the UK, so the ones that you've been in the States, do they feel the same inside? Is there a qualitative difference, or?
Well, they're smaller, but they seem to be very strategically located. All of these were located near mound sites.
Okay.
The culture of the Hopewell, Adena mound cultures, the one at the Great Serpent Mound. Bert did a geometric analysis of it, and when you aligned it it went a line right through the neck of the great serpent. So
Did
I mean,
it?
there was like, yeah, you could really see intention in the design. And then there was another one over in, I forget the name of it right now, the year in 2005 in Ohio, that was aligned with the largest mound in Ohio. But what was interesting about that, it's south of Dayton, Ohio, where it was aligned, and I went into that. It was actually done in corn stalks.
Okay.
I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, it was massive. It was big, but when you aligned the center line through the 7 circles of that, it created a vector that went right into an area where they had been originally years before making the triggers for atomic weapons. And this was 2005 was the I can't think, it'll come to me as to the name, the
location of it.
Yeah, but it seems like the formations and then there was also some in eastern Tennessee, but they were always located in these ancient sites and along streams or in water, but we haven't had many lately. The most recent one was actually 2012 up in Chillicothe, Ohio.
Right.
It has seven parts. All these can be seen at that ICCRA, the imagery.
I'll put a link in the description below. Yeah,
ICCRA.org. Yeah.
Interesting. And so, I mean, obviously a theme of Wiltshire, ancient sites, Avebury, Stonehenge, Silbury Hill. This has been a common thing throughout the narrative, or the narrative of the crop circles. Really has been to punctuate this mystery of the modern, as my teacher used to call it, alongside the mystery of the old, and sort of highlight the hidden implicit geometry that's inside the stone circles and inside the crop circles. When you talked about the alignment then with the serpent mound, Graham Hancock's Ancient Civilizations show on Netflix, they show that beautiful alignment, don't they, of the and so this what's your take on this narrative that draws our attention? It's obviously to us, and it's obviously to draw our attention to these ancient sites and as I see it, how ancient people lived or maybe what their priorities were, and also this thing with alignments. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's more than timelines, but it seems like it's trying to stretch time, or the consciousness of time. The consciousness. I had a dream where out of this one dream, I heard this Paragaia temp. In other words, another Earth time. And I don't know that. And this was related to several dreams.
Para like Spanish. Para like,
right.
Okay.
Para like in paranormal.
Okay.
Another Paragaia, another Earth
Gaia
time.
Earth.
Yeah. And so I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at it poetically. I mean, it isn't. But I think there, and again, why are these formations like the one this week at Stonehenge? At the entryway, the portal to Stonehenge, and then of course, England is dotted with archaeological sites or ancient sites like this. But here in the United States, it's pretty concentrated along the river valleys, and I mean, they have to be really quite specific. But somehow this, other than human intelligence, or now the term is non-human intelligence, NHIs, or there's UFOs, UAPs, or
we get stuck on acronyms to a certain extent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I got a new one.
I remember you and I having a conversation I think we were in Rio or Sao Paulo, and you were talking about renaming crop circles to rifts, and I was like, Jonathan, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, this isn't crop. This is orbals. There's orbs and balls of light.
Okay.
Orbals.
Bit of morphology there.
Right.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Is it a ball of light or is it an orb? Or it's an orbal.
I like that.
So, have you seen an orbal lately?
Have you seen an orbal lately? Yeah, that's nice. So this Stonehenge one, I mean, obviously, there's controversy. Oh, it's man-made, blah, 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 that old chestnut. But what I found interesting was the analysis by Peter Vandenberg, who's incidentally coming on.
Yeah, Peter does great work.
He does great work. He's coming on the show next week.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so, but he's as Karen pointed out recently in a poster, this area, the same surface area as the mound that it's next to.
Yeah,
Isn't that fascinating?
It is. Yeah, yeah. I mean that's intention. That's design.
Yeah, sure.
And and so this non-human intelligence, or this other than human intelligence, or more other than human intelligence. I mean, there's something. I think that's the fascination and that's why I think, when we get into nation states covering they don't know what's going on.
No.
And no, I mean or they have some hint of it. Jacques Vallée does, and they sense that, but there is this other, more than human intelligence that seems to be manifesting, and that's what I think is how to connect with it, how to communicate with that, or be receptive to listen to that. And,
so that I mean, the communication things, I think we need, as you say, the last part there, being receptive to what is actually being our attention's being pointed to, has always been my kind of what's gripped me about it. What is this? What does it mean? What are they saying? But this thing about the nuclear code. So I interviewed Steve Bassett, the political activist. He's on the show a few weeks back, and we talked about the nuclear issue, and particularly, do you remember? I think it's called Red Giant, Robert Salas's book about he was a Minuteman in Montana, and some ball of light or orbital came over and switched off his nuclear. The panel. So he's the guy that sits there waiting for the phone call to press the button, and this thing came switched off. And there's been Robert Kingston's wonderful book, that has received such little credit, but really has. The research has shown that whatever this non-human intelligence is, it's very fascinated with our preoccupation with weapons of mass destruction. And do you think that's what that crop circle was pointing to with these nuclear triggers in the States there?
I think definitely, the one in 2005. I mean, it was really obvious as to how it was lined up, and it tangent the mound. And I wish I could think of that. It's south of Dayton, but I mean, it's all part of that Wright-Patterson complex.
Right.
All part of that. And it went right, it tangent the mound, and then directly into the area where they had been building these atomic. Linda Moulton Howe was there at the time.
Okay.
She was we went there to go visit the site and look at where the crop circle was and how it all aligned and that, and so it was really obvious that was I think certainly in some form of intention. Into its location and its design, and especially since the axis, through the center point of the 7 circles that made up the long, that was
it's deliberate, and it can't be random. Yeah. And that's really directly pointing our attention, isn't it, when it's lined up like that? Interesting. I mean, so this conflation between, obviously the biggest conflation, there's so many different theories about what this non-human intelligence might be, or where it's from, and all that. And it's like Karen and I discussed when she came on the show recently. Go for it.
One thing, I mean, you say non-human intelligence. Yeah, but maybe it's other than human intelligence, because maybe there is actually some human intelligence in it already. I mean, they have actually, to say non-human polarizes it.
Okay.
That's why it's something other than human, more than human. It may be human. I don't know, but it certainly is some form. I call it CIA. Conscious intelligent awareness. In other words, it's a different form of CIA.
I mean,
but it's consciously.
I like that. Karen and I we're big fans of Jeffrey Kripal, and his phrase that says, nothing comes off the table until it's time to take it off. So yeah, I mean, when we get more specific with our language to say, okay, look, it doesn't mean this. What we're trying to get at is this. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Really, to try and.
Well, I think it's certainly metaphor and symbol. I think we need to see it perhaps more poetically than just scientifically. I mean, that's one you can look at. I mean, I like Jung's perspective on conscious typology. You can sense it, you can think it, you can feel it, you can intuit. So that's part of I play with my last name is VierVille. In German would be 4 ways. So I always like to look at something from at least 4 points of view. how do you sense it through your five senses? How do you think it in terms of cognitive? How do you feel it in terms of emotional through the heart, as well as then how do you intuit, or what's the imaginative aspect to that, and then how are those integrated? I'm
No,
playing
I
with
mean,
that.
I don't know if you remember, I presented some years ago, and I brought up this whole quaternity of mind that
Yeah.
Jung was, and I love that. I mean, it was the way that
Mhm.
I was taught to approach the crop circles was
Yeah.
to engage all of those things,
Mhm. Mhm.
afterwards and before more so, and don't think when you're in there. Just observe
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
you're thinking and feeling,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
take a note of it. It was a good way of me
Mhm.
jumping all over it to try and find answers or speculate on answers whilst I
Yeah.
was in there. Yeah,
Mhm.
I can't.
Mhm.
I really like that, and I like. I'm
Mhm.
a big fan of you. Have you come across this book?
Um, Circles, Gary. Yes. Yes, I have.
Yeah,
I haven't read it, but I know Gary. Yeah.
I'm about just over a third of the way through. It's dense
Mhm.
stuff, but
Yeah.
he's done some seriously good work here, isn't he? And
Hmm. Hmm.
and so far, it's just I'm resonating with all of it really,
Hmm.
with the way that he's presenting it. What are the to you the notion of archetypes? Because he's talking
Hmm.
about the re-emergence of the eternal
The
feminine there.
feminine, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So how do you play with all of that? What the archetypal nature of what's behind the formations?
Well, certainly there is the reemergence of the feminine, but I wouldn't just limit it to that, because I would think there would be multiple archetypes. I think one of the archetypes involved in it perhaps is also the hero quest. Joseph, I mean, we go out, we struggle with it, we face with it, we get very depressed about it, but then we work ourselves. But I think, but I think perhaps more fundamental might be, and this would involve the feminine though, is a sense of an initiation archetype, Marseille Eliade. In other words, there is the confrontation, the death, and then the rebirth and the regenerative. And so I think maybe this whole thing is a form of regenerative consciousness. Or I don't like the word consciousness because it's always about something, but I mean, to be conscious, to be aware of this new worldview that is emerging somehow. So I think perhaps there are multiple archetypes involved in this.
I'd
The
agree with you.
archetypes, the archetypes of number, for example. I mean, 1, 2, 3, and how does that? What are the numbers involved? Yeah.
Well, and I also I think I said this in my I know I did. It was in my previous lecture was about Marie Louise von Franz Jung's.
Yeah. Yeah.
She
I
said
worked with her. Yeah.
you did you worked with
Yeah.
her, did you?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
Massively
Yeah.
impressed
Yeah.
about that.
Early
I mean,
70s.
I'm also going through Jung's book, which he wrote as a non-academic book, Man and His
Mhm.
Symbols.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I mean, von Franz worked on that quite extensively, didn't she? After Jung
Yeah.
died as well, and
Mhm.
he wasn't going to do it at first because he just didn't
Right.
feel like he could convey some of the
Mhm.
nuances of the kind of lexicon
Yeah.
that was around his stuff. But it's impressive, isn't it? And
Yeah. Yeah. And then he had a dream that said, "You bet
you got to do it. You got to do it. And so, he lived by he walked his talk,
Yeah.
didn't he? He had the dream, and he said, "I've got to do it." But von Franz said, I think there's a you can get a quote meme off of these wiki quotes or whatever.
Yeah. Mhm.
Numbers are the primary
Yeah.
archetype.
Right.
Talk to me about that, Jonathan. How does that relate to like the hero quest and the feminine archetype, number being behind it all?
Well, it looks at number in the sense of quality, not so much quantity, but what is oneness, what is two-ness, the dynamic of threeness, the quaternity of 4, the pentagon of 5, 6 in terms of the hexagonal, the 7 in terms of being veil or some sort of threshold, 8 is harmonic, 9 is the largest, the 3, and I think it's again, it's metaphor for form. I mean, number. It's both. Well, von Franz's book is Number and Time, or is it Time and Number? I forget. But there's this play of form and process, form and movement, and so I think there's a lot here to do with time and timing, but in numbering has to do with, in a sense, the quality of time. If that's a bit abstract, but
so it's the qualitative aspect then. It's the because we're looking at the quality, and which so many people are not familiar. I mean, I obviously wasn't when you know, so many of us weren't when we first came into formation. When the people started talking about qualities of number, we'd just all been conditioned to think of them as quantities, and then you start to think about, you know. I like the example of 2 and 3. If you've got two people kind of arguing together, it takes a third person to step in and mediate. Yeah. Or you need 3 legs in order to stand a stool up. You can't do it with 2. So there's this quality of 3-ness in the physical world, which we can understand. Yeah. And so it's that quality then that what you're saying is that we're looking at, because archetypal things are about qualities of narratives that can happen in people's lives, aren't they? Would that be a way of saying it?
Yeah, the quality of the patterning.
Right.
Look at the patterning, but it's not just a stuck pattern; it's a movement pattern. That's why, really, when you look at a formation, look at it and look through it and try to imagine it actually moving, even though, because these are just instants. But they're like the film a few years ago, Thrive, did a nice, with Nassim Haramein, did a nice movement. They animated, and so all of these are just instants. But I think they're all actually meant to be seen in form of motion and movement, and it's form and movement, number and process would be a way of.
So it's like Goethe's quote about frozen music, geometry being frozen music. We see that snapshot in time. But really, we've got to think of it as this dynamic process that's happening. I got you. Okay, I hadn't really thought of it like that. So,
but but getting back to what you were, what is message? What is the information? I look at it. There's data. There's a lot of data. Digits and data, and the whole digitization, and we're getting so much data. But then, how do you move it from data to actually information? And then how do you move it from information to knowledge? How do you move it from knowledge to really understanding? And then what might be the wisdom? What's the wisdom of the formations? I mean, there is wisdom coming, but I think that takes time to put it in context.
Do you think the wisdom is connected to the involvement, the engagement? Because you can't really get the wisdom from it unless you're involved in the process and experiencing.
It's a participatory sport. We have to participate. Not only do we have to participate with the process, the phenomena itself, allow ourselves to what might these images be saying, but we have to participate among each other. And I think really this is a very civilized participation. I mean, look at where the formations are, the cultural sites. And I think part of this is creating a new form of culture. I mean, if once we get beyond that, who made it, or hoax, but if we can get into conversation, not only with that other than human intelligence that is creating the imagery, but then like we're doing here today, and like you're doing with your whole podcast, is what is this larger conversation? I mean, it's a form of conversation that connects us to the cosmos, and that's where UFOs, UAPs, orbals, and I mean this is just what's nice about the crop circle phenomena, and again, it's more than circles and crops. That's why we'll riff on that. Okay. real information force field forms.
Oh, love it. Yeah. I mean, Karen and I sort of said, the other day that, these things, they're multivalent, aren't they? There's so many different potential, and it's the wrestling with it. It's the wrestling with yourself. It's the wrestling with others in a civilized way. Where you're, I mean, on 777, I've said this many times in interviews, when I experienced that, one of the big things amongst, having a crop circle of that size, that magnitude appear in front of you in the dark, it's never going to leave me, that experience, right? But one of the big things, Jonathan, of that evening was the conversation I was having with Wynne.
Yeah.
And I was coming at things from a kind of metaphysical, because I was so tied up with chi and metaphysics that I was exploring at the time, and he was very hard science, physical world kind of stuff. But rather than him opposing me and me opposing him, as if we were trying to win each other over to one another, we were finding common language which could enable us to take the conversation to higher levels, if to use the term higher, but you know, to move the conversation on rather than just sit there arguing and trying to win,
rather than debate. In this respect, the Bohm dialogue may be very, very helpful to people. Are you familiar with the David Bohm? Oh, the David Bohm dialogue. You know Bohm, the physicist. He developed the implicit order. He developed a method, or he presents a method of listening deeply, because when you are you're not trying to challenge, it's not debate, it's not conflict, but you're listening, and actually in your listening, then you create a field where you create a field that is receptive to the implicate order. And it's a long, and you can get stuff online. You just Google Bohm dialogue.
I've got the book, The Implicate Order. I've never read it. I bought it years ago. It's downstairs on the shelf, and I think I've opened it a couple of times and started it, and then other things have taken me.
Well, in terms of physics, in other words, the formations are coming out of they're manifesting out of the implicate order in fields, and I mean that would be one way of looking at it. But then to have a conversation about it, what does the imagery bring to mind? What does the imagery bring to consciousness? That becomes part of a conversation, circular in a sense. It's not, there's no head of the table, but it's a King Arthur's round table where it's a potluck. Everybody brings some dish, to the table, and it's on the table, and you don't take it off until, as Jeffrey says. But I think that conversation is part of, I think, what is leading humanity for this cosmic connection, this cosmic communication. I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's going to be on very subtle realms in terms of telepathic or dream, or it's not, and it probably will be beyond even electromagnetic field. It's of a different order, but I think highly spiritual in that sense.
And I always ask this question. So when we use the term spiritual, I think since the sort of New Age kind of started to rival religion as an organized system of communing with the divine, self-exploration, and so on and so forth, how do you define spirituality in that sense with regards to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a long. It starts out with, in a sense, a spiritual experience. Moses had a spiritual experience, but then over time it becomes a religious construct, But there's a long, basically we are, in a sense, we have a spark of divinity within us as human. That is why that is what is of essence to, I think, to each human. And you can look at that. You can look at history, the Pythagoreans, the Neo-Plato. I mean, there is a stream of Western culture that has that spiritual tradition, which then, of course, is Judeo-Christian, Islamic. I mean, there's multiple ways in different languages and different systems, and there are multiple ways of going up the mountain. You just need to make sure you come back and bring what what has, and of course the whole tradition, the mystic tradition. There's all of it, but back to how to spirit. We here in the West, and it's no longer West; it's North, South, East, West. I mean, there's not this East or this West. I mean, it's a planet. This is a planetary phenomena. It's out, and it's. It's a galactic phenomena. I go to perhaps the Neoplatonists, to Proclus or to Plotinus, or that Platonic tradition, where it's, in a sense, it's the ineffable one. the spirit is you can't really define it, you can't touch it, you can't it is that which is fundamental to the closest would be in terms of the physics, the 0 point energy. It's that on the other side of the 0 point energy, so to speak. It's spirit. I mean, it's you can see it and sense it poetically, I think, metaphorically, symbolically.
Yeah, I've always thought metaphor is the language of spirit.
Yeah, but I don't know if there's a formula for it. There may be protocols for it. There's ways that one can attempt to relate. I mean, prayer, meditation. Obviously, it's.
I mean, I think of those as spiritual practices that are supposed to designed to try and get you to find or forge some kind of connection with this ineffable one. Would you agree?
Right, and the best form of that is sleep and dreaming. The easiest form, I think, is
it's effortless. You just have to lay down and shut your eyes, and it happens.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Pay attention.
Turn the screens off, and that's we need more dream time and less screen time.
I agree with that. Did you catch the recent TV show Shogun?
No, I didn't.
It's a remake of the old film that I can't remember the name of the actor. It's a remake of it. It's absolutely brilliant. If you get a chance to watch it, it's really, really good. But the reason I bring that up is because we talked about East meets West, and when I first came into the formations, as you know, I was coming at it from this kind of martial arts, chi. What is the mystery of chi? Not what is the warriors, archetypal warriors?
We were out in the field there, and she was all dressed in orange, and
that's it. And so this film Shogun, it's a as I say, it's a remake of an old film. They've done it in sort of 10 episodes, and essentially the Portuguese arrived in Japan first, bringing Catholicism, and managed to convert some of the Japanese lords into Catholicism and convert them, whilst others were sort of still remaining staunchly allied to the Eastern philosophies, which contained precision with their rituals and ceremonies, as like making tea and perfection as much as possible. Everything, the way they walked, the way they talked, and the way that they taught was to develop poetry to this high level, so that when they communicated, they encapsulated this massive meaning of something in just these few words. And so what I see that film as is East meeting West. And so when we talk about, like you said there, the West, and it's no longer the West, I still feel in some respects that we haven't fully, the way that the West and the East has met has been this kind of battle for who's going to win with regards to a religious set of rules or the best way to live and so on and so forth. You said it's no longer that. Do you think that that's changed now? And if so, how do you see that has changed?
Yeah, well, I mean, time and space has changed dramatically. I mean, not only the space race, when my cousin landed on the moon, I mean, that whole different perspective now of the planet, that has, it's a different worldview.
Got you.
So, there certainly still is East and West, but I think there's also as much North and South. I mean, look at South America, look at Africa, look at Antarctica. I mean, we have to really look at what we're at in terms of a spherical rather than a binary.
I agree.
And so I always hear that, the Western civilization and the collapse of the West and Spangler and but this is larger now in terms of planetary humanity. The work of Thomas Berry, I really appreciate Thomas Berry.
I haven't come across that.
Father Thomas Berry, The Dream of the Earth, the great work, really good stuff. He was a protege, or he was influenced by Teilhard de Chardin.
Right.
And so check up, there's some really good resources on Thomas Berry, and he, in his sense of, and I really agree with him, we are at a point in time where our mission now is he says to reinvent, I say to reimagine the human at the species level. I mean, we're at a point in time through shared dream experiences, community, developmental. Brian Swim, does some very good work, had worked with Thomas Berry on the new story.
Right.
So they're putting this in the context of big history, of the length of the history of civilization, not the nation state type history, not east or west, but it's humanity and it's planetary. And I think that's where it has to do with a new emerging worldview, where we are part of a galactic community, and that's where this, coming back around to this other than human intelligence, how can we become receptive, vigilant, still maintain our human sovereignty? I mean, we're not here we don't want to be colonized in that sense, and that people are fearful of that. But we really need to maintain and be vigilant with our humanity. But we need to re-examine our humanity at the species level, because this, I call them sometimes the others, other than human, existentially real species. And there is this, and they're saying this now in terms of what's coming out, in terms of what is being revealed, that we have bodies and we have craft and there are other species. So how do we we need to consider this.
I mean, you use the word stories there, and I like Jordan Peterson's phrase that says, we are storied organisms. Human beings are storied organisms. And I think that the stories that have contained and controlled us by the empire builders and the elites over so many millennia, whether they be religious or political or whatever, is the sort of shell that we're trying to crack and break out of to open ourselves up into this more galactic story that incorporates something that comes from the old. Because as Kripal again points out, you go back and you see that every single civilization back when they sort of wrote or drew pictures on the walls seems to have indicated that they had some kind of relationship with a non or other than human,
with others, the other,
the other. I mean, I like to keep, and I go along with Kripal, because when you have sort of thoughts for yourself and think, you come to this idea of what you think it might mean, and then somebody else like Kripal says the same thing, you go, kind of validating what I sort of intuited, and that notion that that all is mind, and that we are participating in a greater mind that is that oneness that we can't decide, can't sort of elaborate on or put our finger on.
Well, that's the edge of spirit.
Yes.
We're kind of nudging up to, but I mean, we do have to have a sense of our own soul, our own individuated soul. And in that respect, I mean, what is this that we're coming up to? How are we kind of evolving into? There's some sense of evolution into it, and into our awareness. Yeah.
I mean, a couple of examples that I'll give you that so the story of like my journey from working in law, running a private investigation agency, having a nervous breakdown, meeting a guy that took me to the crop circles, embracing the crop circles, going through all the ridicule and condemnation of, what are you, crazy, why you that to me is my version of the of what I've lived, of the kind of hero's quest. Not that I'm a hero, but you have to kind of fight off those attacks internally and say, I'm going to keep going,
Yeah, well, Jung would call that the individuation process.
Right.
I mean,
How would you separate? So many spiritual traditions and spiritual practices, and the ways people interpret Buddhist practice these days, is to eradicate the ego. Do you agree with that?
No, I think you don't eradicate, you adapt, or you sensitize, integrate. Yeah. I mean, you need, because ego, again, following Jung on this, I mean, the ego is the center of consciousness. It's the central complex. There are multiple complexes in the personality, but the ego is that which is traditionally, connected to the larger, deeper self, which is the imagery of God, and there are multiple images of God, and it's hard to talk about that without graphics.
Sure.
But
These little
no,
circles.
yeah, but there is in that, there's a really good D.T. Suzuki.
Oh yeah.
Who he did a really good comparison of Zen Buddhism and Meister Eckhart, medieval mysticism, and essentially they blend. It's very similar. I mean, it's different language in that, but there's that connection with the divine. And in many respects, I think maybe this is what the formations, the field formations, the crop circle are actually somehow encouraging us to look at these sacred spaces, like Karen, the temporary temples.
I love that.
Yeah. They're there for a while, but how and it involves time. But again, what is this whole process? I mean, it's been going on for how many decades now? How many centuries actually? And so how to see this as metaphor with message, and for humanity. How do we? But yeah, story is that's what is, and I think each person needs to, what is your story? What is your portfolio?
Yeah, so there's my story, but then there's my story, for example, of meeting you and then talking with you and sitting in crop circles and talking with you and philosophizing about this, that, and the other, and Michael and Karen and throwing boots. Exactly, Wellygate, famous for that. Yeah, that was 10 years ago now, Jonathan. Can you believe that?
Was it? Wow.
Yeah. And so the other thing was, so recently, and this is up your street with regards to spas and water, and I've recently kind of latched on to Wim Hof.
Yeah.
And I began reading his book. I watched a podcast with him, and I was so impressed, because one of the things that attracted me to the whole Qigong stuff when I was younger was I joined a martial art called Kateda, which was brought over from Indonesia, and it was about breath work and using breath work and meditation, and focusing the mind, we were able to achieve so-called superhuman feats of breaking bricks on our stomach, or being hit with iron bars, and all these seemingly macho things. But they were all kinds of tests that were just designed to see if you'd managed to achieve this level of focus and intention, together with the breath work of directing the breath to certain areas of your body, then to so it wasn't about breaking bricks and so on. Ostensibly it looked like it, but it was more about, have you passed that level? And then we moved on. I remember we did this training that was called One Direction training. So a higher level master would be standing 10 feet behind you, and you'd be sitting on the floor in front of him, or sometimes standing, and he would direct chi to one of his hands, and you'd have to sense which direction,
which hand,
and hold your hand up. And we statistically monitored it, and it was above chance that we were feeling the right hand, and then when you did that, you were able to move on to the next level, because you weren't just acting on chance and so on. So I was 16 when I did all that kind of stuff. And so this background of having an idea that we may be much more than we think of ourselves, based on the stories we've been told about ourselves, brings me to this whole thing of the story we've been told is you go to work, you go to church, maybe, you do this, you do that, you have some children, you retire, you die. Life is meaningless. We're just swimming around on a ball of rock and so on. So this is the narrative that we're given, let's say, by the mainstream. Okay. And then to come up against a notion that, hey, if you look at yourself in a different way, if you do some of these practices, you can experience some things which go against the grain of what you've been told. Do you see that the crop circles are potentially trying to wake us up to that?
Yeah, but in a very civilized way. It doesn't have to be perhaps as extreme in a sense. I think it's part of, an initiation process. Or it's part of, an intention has to be involved in it. But it, yeah, because there's a mystery to it,
Okay.
because there's an uncertainty to it. It's not something you can nail down and say this is this and this is that and this is physics. I mean, it is something that is deeper than a material. But I think, in many respects, what you just described as Western, or not even Western, but just the commoditization of culture, the acquiring. I mean, that I think in many respects we've kind of moved beyond that now. Even I think there's a lot of people that aren't. Well, I don't know. I mean, what is different societies, different. I mean, these are all culturally specific. So one would have to look at where. And I'm not sure if I'm answering your question here, but yeah, the crop circle phenomena is a catalyst for new stories of conscious awareness.
I think that's what I was getting at. So, for example, so one of my professors at university, Professor Bowman, he runs the journalism school at Cardiff University. He more than 10 years ago now he's a martial artist, and he began the academic martial arts studies, and it's on the canon now in as a discipline, because the martial arts contains so many different film and media, cultural studies, the way that martial arts has influenced, the way it's integrated from east to west and and changed things. Like Bruce Lee, for example, was a massive. But he published a paper recently about the Dantian, this imaginary place 2 inches below the navel that is the focus of our center. So, for example, the crop circle that we had last year, that was the circle with the center dot in it. There are images, Chinese images, of man standing in one of those circles with the center dot at the Dantian point. Okay, and basically the paper it's a brilliant paper, and what it basically suggests is that East meets West in the Dantian because physically the Dantian doesn't exist. But when we begin to focus on it and breathe into it and use it as our imaginary center, it is our center of gravity if we if we then focus on it as being more than that, it actually becomes more than that. It begins to develop and build and become the basis around which all of your training develops. He says that's East meeting West. That's the imaginary.
Yeah. It sounds like Corbin in the imaginal realm,
right?
In many respects, or in Sufi mysticism, you get that's it. Yeah, I think that would make sense. I'm not familiar with what you're just describing, but it would, to move our conscious awareness out of just objects. I mean, part of it is phenomenological. In other words, there are different ways of observing object. Bergson talks about it. It's in, and I guess it's that liminal space. Karen talks about the liminal. And it's that third space, perhaps. There are different ways. Again, it's I think for me it has to do with psyche or soul. I mean, that's where Jung, it has to do with the soul, the psyche, and the anima mundi.
Yes,
because it's not only my individual soul or psyche or the collective, but it's also what is the psyche, the anima of the soul of the world. In that sense,
and that's that connection to what is it? Is it imaginalis? But there's something that goes before.
Right.
Is it mundus imaginalis?
Right.
Yeah.
Mundus imaginalis.
Yeah.
It's Henry Corbin. Yeah. But again, this and it's really quite wide open. as to where, and it gets to the fact of, you don't necessarily have dreams, but dreams are having you.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Well, that's it. So like, for example, I used to say, I love. So let me go to a Heideggerian kind of concept, right? So one of the things I love about Heidegger is he said, like, if you come from the Platonic school, and I wanted to say earlier that Plato, in talking about us devolving rather than evolving, I see that in terms of religion, let's say, which started out as these liberating spiritual practices which would forge your own connection with the divine. But as more and more they became rule books that were enforced on people, they devolved from what they originally were. So I like that from Plato. But Plato would let's say, if you wanted to describe a hammer in a Platonic sense, it would be describing, the material that the wood was made of and how long it measured and what the material, and you could go on and on and on and sort of have this complete list of all the properties of the hammer, but really you wouldn't know anything about a hammer unless you picked it up and started knocking nails in with it. And that brings you to Heidegger, who says, the opposite is true. Philosophy is about our connection with objects in the world, and we learn about ourselves when we actually grab hold of something and start. So a wooden staff, if you practice this staff and you've got your own focus on your dantian, your center of gravity, and you start moving with this staff, eventually, Jonathan, you're not sure if the stick's moving you or you're moving the stick. And I think that's what you're talking about, right? Yeah.
In the sense of the image, or the
because of the dream of it.
What, and that's why, I mean, the fascination with the crop circle phenomena is the imagery that is coming out of it, and the sacred geometry what Peter's discovering, or Karen, what they're discovering and I think that's the form, but it's both form and process, but there's form, process, and there's message, and that's where I think what you're doing here in terms of the conversation is, how do we bring this conversation to a larger community that is cosmic, that is planetary, that isn't just nation state, so to speak, but it's more of a it's based in our humanity.
It's based in our humanity, absolutely. I mean, if you wake up to yourself, there's a healing aspect of that, not only mentally but physically. And by waking up to yourself, I think that is a spiritual practice by virtue of those two aspects that kind of get brought along with it. And so would you be in agreement with me if we said that that's the kind of process that comes along with engaging with the crop circles?
Oh yeah, but let's come back around to story again. Okay. What is the story of this phenomena? I mean, what are the stories? Multiple stories. Yeah, I mean, we come in at different points along the way. I started 2003, 2004, and Karen's been doing it since. She was
1991. Yeah.
And so and even before that, like Cullen, and I mean,
Cullen Andrews, yeah.
What is the larger story? What is the new story? How does this phenomena play in? Because it is planetary. I mean, beautiful formations in France, Czech Republic, Germany. I mean, this isn't just limited. I mean, most of them, thank goodness, are in Eastfield, but
good old Eastfield.
But what is this? And then with the orbs, and I mean, it's all of that is part of this. Why is this happening? And what is there significance, meaning, and purpose to this? I mean, like you said, like Michael once said, he walked into it and he never walked out.
I say the same thing. Yeah, 1997, I walked in my first crop circle and I've never left. It grips you. I mean, it doesn't grip everybody like that. You go on that journey, and that's the beauty of it, is that it doesn't. You're not forced to stay. It's entirely
Yeah.
your choice.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, you're sovereign.
exactly. It respects that, doesn't it? The whole thing of it. Eastfield. Have you seen the book? Is it Curious Wiltshire? I've forgotten the exact title of the book now. The book that shows that Milk Hill and Knapp Hill are connected. In the Adam's grave and the top of Milk Hill, with the two mounds represent the female's breasts. It's like the goddess is laying along. There's an image of the body, and there's actually two lines that come down from Knapp Hill, down the bottom and go into Eastfield that are said to be the umbilical cord of the goddess.
Of course, this is all anthropomorphic projection.
It is. I mean, it does look like the hills have been shaped.
Yeah.
But when you connect the dots with regards to this feminine, the fertility, the notion that our ancestors would have been concerned with those kinds of things.
They needed food,
right, and that we could say their primitive understanding of. But my friend sent me some. There's been a recent discovery in America. I don't know if you know. It's one like a wall, like a sort of polygonal wall that you find at Cuzco, has just been discovered in the States, right?
Where at?
Let me find it for you. I'll tell you now.
The Northeast or the West?
Let me see.
I mean, it's
I mean, one of the things I was going to say with regards to that is that when he sent it to me, my immediate prehistoric megastructure discovered in Montana, USA. It's called the Sage Wall. I'll send it to you, and I'll post a link in the description below for the viewers to see. Deep in the remote mountainous wilderness of Montana, we find this remarkable structure known as the Sage Wall. This imposing megalith. It's got these great big blocks and these small ones that go between, and it's no way built by savages. No way built by primitives who had primitive worldviews.
Yeah, here you need Hugh Newman in The Giants.
He's coming on the show in the next couple of weeks, so we'll have him talk about that for sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's that whole thing, that apparently they, these mound building cultures were not Shawnee Indian like we. I mean, there's a whole. It's going way back. Then there's a great site in Alabama, in Louisiana, Poverty Point, which goes back. Yeah, check out Poverty Point.
Okay.
There was a huge monumental site. It's one of the oldest ritual centers in North America in the Mississippi watershed. And then there's other things up and down. See, all the earlier cultures here, everything was based on the rivers, the Ohio River and the Mississippi River.
Right.
That was huge cultural sites. And then there was a mass Cahokia in Illinois, which was another. It was, I think, I don't know how many, 20,000 people, about 1,200. I mean, there's a whole other history before colonization,
right? Before
Brits came, started
did our thing,
or the Swedes or the French or the
Portuguese,
Germans. Before Europe decided to take a vacation in North America, and the Spanish. I mean, it's. Sure. But again, we're at a point where it's, it's the whole planet, and it's.
All of that story is up for re-evaluation in a larger context of a cosmic community, is what I think you're saying. Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting.
And it's Apple that is made in China.
So, dreams.
Yeah.
This is your speciality. You said earlier, dreams isn't, whether we're dreaming or dreaming's being done to us. Do you see that this, other than human intelligence, influences our dreams, comes in and can interact with us in our dream space?
Yeah. Yeah. I can speak from personal experiences. Yeah. I've had dreams where I've dreamt, excuse me. There's, dreams are, my definition of dreams are everything from indigestion to the Word of God.
Indigestion? Tell me how you mean that.
Oh, yeah. Well, you can have a dream where you have indigestion,
Okay.
or you wake up with a sour stomach, and so I mean you physiological dreams, but you can also have very divine inspiration, angelic dreams. So there's a whole range of experiential dreams, and some are very deep, some are shallow. There's lucid dreaming, there's clairvoyant dreaming. There's multiple ways of multiple types of dreams and dreaming. But basically, dreaming is another form, is an altered state of conscious awareness. And again, a lot depends too on where you're at when you go to sleep, what you bring with you into sleep. And so, but no, I've had personal dreams where, in terms of encounters with orbs, with angelic force, or, with this, what my imagination presents. But what is not intriguing is not the word. What is and interesting is not you can't cause yourself to dream what you want to dream. You can't. You can go in with questions, and you can go in with intention. You can incubate your dilemma, and you can pose that, you can frame it in that, and then you just have to give it up and let to be truthful, to see what response comes in and of itself, because dreams have a will of their own in that respect. You can't control your dreams. Some people say they try to, but maybe one or two here or there. But if you look at it over days, weeks, months, years, I've been keeping dream records since the early 60s.
Wow.
And so,
so a massive amount of your lived experience on this planet is really taking notice of that.
Oh, yeah, of that state of mind.
Wow.
Yeah. And recording and making sense of, because there's a story. Talk about story. There's not only a lived story, but there's also a story that is coming out of one's dreams.
And do you mean in the sense, like, so I always think of Jung's example of, like, I think he was had somebody in therapy, and they kept having a recurring dream that somebody was on their back. And climbing on their shoulders and on their back, and he interpreted it in the sense of, your subconscious is trying to tell you to you've got too much on your shoulders, you need to get something off your back. I had a friend recently who's had so much on her plate. She's battled with cancer. Her landlord wants her to move out in the middle of all of this, and she's got 3 boys who are grown up but still very much dependent on her mothering them, in a sense of and she takes it all on. She's an incredible woman, right? But she came into work and she said, I had a dream last night that I was driving to the airport and the car kept getting smaller and I couldn't fit all the baggage in it. And it just struck me that the overt symbolism of that was that she's got too much baggage, and her consciousness is saying, look, you don't have the capacity to take all this on. You've got to let some of it go. Would you agree?
Yeah. That would be, of course, you'd want to converse with her, her situation, but have conversation on that. But as metaphor, as symbol,
And so when I did my language and communication studies at university, it was visual metaphor was a big thing. We had to analyse all sorts of newspaper articles and sort of see what the semiotic events were in regards to the imagery that was being used to convey the message of underlying the piece of communication. And so that's when I think it came to me that whenever I tried to express some experience I was having with the crop circles, or with reflections in consciousness of what was going on with my story, it constantly ended up being metaphor. And so that's when I just thought to myself, well, metaphor is this language of this metaphysical part of ourselves.
And one could say these are metaforms.
Metaforms.
Yeah, in terms of metafield forms.
Ah, yes.
Would be. and they spark, they engage, they require a participation of the imagination beyond just the scientific whodunit or how was it done. I mean, and you just, it doesn't really matter in that sense. I mean, it's especially if you look at the long term. I mean, where's Doug and Dave now? So in the grave. But anyway, I mean, yeah, it's. But coming back, what is the significance, meaning, and purpose?
Oh, you mean of it as a whole, or?
Yeah, as a whole. I mean, what is these are signs, these are signals, these are symbols.
We see if we have to answer that from let's say a linguistic studies perspective, a sign and a symbol are different things. A sign is a traffic light which is going red and green and telling you danger, telling you safety. A symbol is multivalent. Once you start to live a symbolic life where something can mean so many different things and so many different things to others, which is what crop circles are, then we're in a whole different world, aren't we?
Yeah. But what are they signaling? What is the significance? What is the meaning? There's value here. I mean, there's no specific answer, but I mean, as you say, they're multivalent. I mean, I don't think, and that's why the poetic mind, Gaston Bachelard, and his see these as these images more poetically than, nuts and bolts sign. I mean, you can see that. You need to look at that, and that's really good. But that's only part of the wholeness. The wholeness is a symbol. I mean, as I say, metaphors.
I mean, do you remember? I think you were there when I gave a presentation called "A Language Older Than Words," and it was. Yeah. I was showing that alphabet. And the way that we, because some people say, well, if there's a message, why don't they just write it in English? And okay, well, let's analyze how we interpret an alphabet. And it's really just these are symbols for sounds we make. And there was that film, I can't remember, it's got Antonio Banderas in it, and he encounters some Vikings, and they say to him, is it true that you draw sounds? And it's a curious way of thinking of writing an alphabet, drawing sounds, isn't it? And then you've got the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is brought up in that film, what's that alien film, Arrival, where they're drawing those circles with all the dots, and they're saying, well, it doesn't actually, it's not representing sounds, it's representing meaning. And then we're in deep dark waters with all of that, aren't we? Really?
Oh, I love it. That's where Spa comes in. That's where the waters. Yeah. No, I mean that. Yeah. No, I mean it's. I mean that's the beauty of this. I mean, and conversing about it and communing with the mystery. I think it's. Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But. I think there is the whole the realm of the dream life. There's just a whole lot of information and imagery and that, but it requires a contemplative perspective on it. It's not an action oriented, and again, you asked earlier about ego. That's where it's really important. The ego is, but for memory, not so much for will.
Okay.
It's important that your ego can, because a dream is always remembered. I mean, unless you're lucid dreaming and that, but still, you're always going to have, the dream will be only all you have will be the memory of it, and you recorded it or drew it or sand played with it or different ways you've created something to help, but it's always a memory to work with the information in the imagery. It's you can't, but then you work with that, but then there's always another night's sleep, and there will always be another dream. So I mean, it's unending.
My teacher used to say, and you just made me think of this. he used to say, Gary, you need to understand the value of the importance of the order of memory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I still wrestle with what that means, because as I've contemplated that over my journey, I've thought, okay, what does he mean by that? Does he just mean, like, this happened at that time and before that, and then that came after that?
Mm-hmm.
But it was deeper than that. It was something about the way that fitted into what had happened to me in the day, in waking state, to then the connection to the dream, and how that lined up with maybe some other experience that could have been in the past, and also lines up with some experience which I'm yet to experience.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole issue of time. Dream time. Is it dream present? Is it dream past? Is it dream future? Yeah, that's you really get in. That's the Paragaya attempt. That's the other form of time. It's a deeper time, a deeper meaning of time. Time, times, and timing, and synchronicities, and so it's it's not just the linear time, but it's the gestalt, it's the wholeness of time. I just came across speaking of that, came across this other really interesting book. I just got it yesterday or a few days ago. It's called Every When: God, Symmetry, and Time.
Oh, really? Who's the author?
It's written by a MIT physicist. I haven't gotten into it yet, but it looks
Thomas
Every When.
Sheehan. Every When.
Yeah, it's a Sheahen, Thomas B. Sheehan, but it really looks good. But but that's
I was gonna. What came to my mind then is dream time, Aboriginal dream time, because to me that kind of nicely brings us to this whole business of story.
Yeah.
And
Dream
this
story.
relation to dreaming. You're familiar with the song lines having a physical, with their maps, right? So they showed them how to get around the territory. But this oral culture of passing on knowledge, accumulated knowledge down the line, without diluting it, and without having the ability to write and record it on paper, had to come in the form of story, didn't it? Because we respond to the twists and turns of story. Do you see mythological stories, for example, Odysseus, let's say, these Greek myths, as kind of connected to archetypal?
Oh, sure,
right.
Yeah.
But also connected to the notion of dreaming.
That's at what point does a myth become dream, and at what point does a dream become myth?
You're right. Yeah.
And it would have to do with the meaning. What is? Yeah. I mean, myths are collective dreams. This is, I think, really where Thomas Berry really gets it. The great work and the dream of the earth. Two classic. I mean, and again, the need for, and that's where we're at in terms of humanity. We're in need of this new story. But new is not, I mean, it's a new story, but it has some really old parts to it. I mean, it isn't just new, update, create, it's not a technological.
It's not throw all the rest of that away.
Right. Yeah. It's like, help me out here. What do I do with my Steve Jobs music? Back in my garage, I have the Steve Jobs Museum, the first SE from 84. Yeah. But they're all working. I'm looking for somebody, let me put it out there. I'm looking for a Mac historian who wants to play with, I got, the iMac and the Cube and all those. And anyway.
Wow.
So, but, that's part of our myth now. I mean,
it's a good way of putting it.
The internet, internet myth.
I think the other thing that came to my mind was something we said earlier was psyche. You brought up the psyche, and that comes from the root word, if I'm right, from memory, psychein, which means to breathe or to blow. Yeah,
psyche. Yeah. The numinous breath. Nous, N-O-U-S, is the breath life. Of course, psyche and eros are part of that.
I haven't heard that. Eros, you mean eros like the arrow of love or whatever?
No,
No.
well, Eros the god,
Right.
Eros of the desire. That Eros was a god in Psyche. That's again some Greek myths in terms of desire and
Okay.
love and soul. Yeah, yeah, and I'd have to go back and look at it, but that's part of imagery. And again, so much of this was oral culture. The Iliad and the Odyssey, all of that stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, they didn't really start writing, and then, but
Well, it was sung. Homer was, if Homer existed, but this it was song, and it wasn't in prose, was it? It was in poetic song form.
Who is your Brit? I have his book here somewhere. What is this? He was part of the Inklings. He was very influential for C.S. Lewis. Just a minute, I have it. What is his name? Oh shoot! I was reading it the other day. It's on my other desk.
These things always are when you're trying to find
Yeah,
them.
yeah. What is he's the great, shoot. It'll come, but he, during the 20s and the 30s, this bothers me now that I can't.
Doesn't matter. What was the message?
Yeah, well, he really understood the evolution of language, how we moved from anyway, and that's bothering me that I can't. Here it is. Yeah, Owen Barfield.
I never heard of him.
Oh, you need to take a look at Owen Barfield, a poet.
Poetic diction. Move it slightly to your right. I can't quite see it. Owen Barfield. Okay. Barfield.
Yeah. Check him. Owen is really he's not many people have heard of him.
No.
Or that more people need to hear of his work, but he was had great influence on C.S. Lewis as well as on Tolkien.
I did a module on Tolkien at university, and he was influenced by C.S. Lewis as well. So
yeah. But this guy influenced both of them. Poetic diction, a study of meaning, a study in meaning, and he shows how. I
need to read that.
Yeah. Okay. No, it's good stuff. Yeah, he nails it in terms of, and I got a bunch of notes in there.
Interesting. So what's he saying then?
Well, there's. I don't know how to explain him. You'll have to read him.
Okay.
I mean, I have it here.
I've always, to be honest, I've always really struggled with poetry. It's like, it's like I've got to break through a barrier, I think, and I've never broken through it. When people recite poetry, it bores me. I hate to say that, right? But it like, I don't get the message most of the time of what it's trying to conjure up in me, and I've studied books on how to understand poetry, right? And they've talked about the cadence and the rhythm of it, and the meter of it.
Well, that's where it gets dogmatic.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree. But what he's doing here, it says the study in meaning. This was written way back in 1928.
Really?
But
it would have been, if he influenced C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, sure.
Yeah. But it's not merely a theory of poetic diction, but also a theory of poetry and of knowledge. So it's how we know things. How do we know it poetically, or do we know it scientifically, or how do we know it aesthetically? He really gets into and again in the imagination. So he primarily we know through what we image through the imagination.
And how is he linking that to meaning?
Through the words and how the words are put together, and how and he looks at different reflections on the evolution of humanities through how we use the words, and he shows how meanings of words change over time. It's a whole other conversation. We could read it and then come
indeed.
back. And,
I mean,
yeah.
I remember again at university, they, excuse me, there was a module on the evolution of language. And Alison Ray was the professor. She was a neurolinguist, so she dealt with a lot of the way the mind, which parts of the brain are dealing with how we grasp meaning. And she worked with a lot of people that had sort of parts of their brain removed to see what they were missing and so on. But she was also she was a part of a book written by Guy. Name escapes me, The Evolution of Language. And one of the interesting things about going to Cardiff University was that Wales, as you know, has its own language, which was dying, and in the sense that less and less people, because it was so old, were using it, and English becomes so dominant that the Welsh government absolutely ploughed billions into making it compulsory to learn it in school. They made sure that every letter that came out from any government department was bilingual. And every road sign has it written in English and in Welsh, and they're one of the only languages that was doing that, and then did this with the bell curve, right? And what was interesting was that they found that they could understand, because studying the evolution of language is nonsense, because you can never go back and find out where it begins. And at the beginning of this book, sort of you realize how ridiculous it is to think, well, who come up with the rules of grammar, and what did they have a court that decided it? And you just go, yeah, that couldn't have happened. But what they discovered was that when you look at how language is changing right now, you get more of an insight into possibly how it evolved. So it's looking right now what's under our noses with like we're looking at like text and social media language like LOL and
and all those,
laugh my arse off or whatever it is, LMA,
LOA,
yeah.
LOMA.
So this but it's all about how we all right, so we agree, right? If we make a symbol, you and I together, and we say, right, we you and I are going to be a part of a secret group, and we're going to this cup is not going to mean cup, it's going to mean something else because it's got this symbol on it, and so on and so forth. That's not really what we're talking about here, is it? We're talking about something that I think that's what you're talking about. This book's saying is that there's something inside of us that responds to this universal kind of language. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and again, looking at his table of how he goes into this, the effects of poetry, metaphor, meaning and myth, language and poetry, the poet, making of meaning, verse and prose, archaism, strangeness, and then conclusion. So I mean, he really kind of quietly grasped, again, how we, but on an imaginal level. In a metaphor, not so much scientifically in terms of, but he was scientific about it. But again, that's coming back around to the cup you just had there with the flower of life on it. I mean, now that's a huge symbol. I mean, and what does that? I mean, and we're finding that in the phenomena. And all the sacred geometry that goes with that. And that's one of the beauties that we're discovering in the crop circle phenomena is, again, that sacred geometry. I mean, that, in a sense, is the language of number in this whole, what's being laid out for us. But then how do we, what do you do with that once you discover that? And how, I mean...
Well, yeah, to me, there's always more to discover. It's like...
Yeah.
So did you see Terrence Howard's recent podcast on the Joe Rogan show?
Yeah, parts of it.
Parts of it. Okay, so
1 times 1 is 2. Or
yeah,
2.
yeah. I mean, he's just done another one with Eric Weinstein, which I've got to catch up. But it's like 4 hours, 20 minutes. There's not enough hours in the day. But okay, so the gaps. This curved triangle. He 3-dimensionalizes it. And he's actually used that to patent technology, this thing called I've forgotten what it's called now. It's some sort of flying thing that Eric Weinstein says is genius. Because rather, it's like music, right? Most people, I remember when I was teaching African drumming, you say, right, I want you to hit a note here and a note here and a note here. And then when you put the ensemble together with different people playing different instruments, it's not the notes that matter, it's the spaces in between.
Right.
And that's what Terence Howard's done with this diagram. We've all been looking at the circles that make up the flower of life, but we really, until I saw this three-dimensionalization of then joining the points together, I was like, oh my God, I'd never thought of looking at it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Take a look also, Jane 108.
Jane,
you seen-
yeah. You mean the Facebook page, the Jane?
The secretary, yeah, he did a nice short
He
review.
did. I watched it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you saw that,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, there's something there. And Weinstein, I mean, he was civil in talking with him. And I think there is something there, and that was good.
I mean, my son called me earlier. My oldest son, Aaron. You know Aaron. I think you've met Aaron. And he said he hasn't watched it all yet, but he said I've seen some bits. And he said, although he said the same as you actually, Weinstein's civil, and he acknowledges, the genius of this invention that he's made. But he sort of came at it from this point of view as, look, I'm an academic, and I'm the
persona.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and I'm the authority on this, and like if I haven't, and even my son picked out some things that he was doing, and where he was really talking about inflation when he was trying to say it was something else, and I said to my son, well, so many times in history, someone who's not from that field or not gone through that process of academia comes along and points out something that nobody else thought of. And it's usually rejected at first. There was a book that we studied at university called Men, Women and Language, and it was about how women and men use language differently. And it was written by a non-academic. And it was so controversial that it had academics then go and study everything that was in this book, and they refuted a lot of it, quite rightly so. But it opened up so many doors of inquiry that they would have never thought of. And so what I like about what Joe Rogan's doing with this, bringing these opposing people together to have a civil conversation so that we could get the benefit. It goes back to what you were saying earlier, doesn't it? About this is part of the paradigm. Yeah,
and opening up. And there are some other things I need to bring to your attention in terms of this conversation. I don't know if you've seen any of the work of Ashton Forbes.
No.
You need to check out Ashton Forbes. He's on X as well as on YouTube. To make a long story short, last August he came across videotapes of drone and satellite showing the disappearance of the Malaysian flight MH370.
Oh, you've mentioned this to me before, haven't you?
Yeah. Check him. I'm trying to do due diligence and discernment among that. I mean, he has a really good podcast on hard truths, and he's getting into the science. And what he's finding is that there is an emerging of the general relativity and quantum, and that there's a whole other science. And one of the things that he's uncovered is that they misinterpreted Maxwell's equations. I mean, it's a whole new. They've reversed it. I mean,
I'll check it out.
I don't want to say anything. I mean, anybody who's watching this, they need to go look at themselves and make sense of it. But there's something going on there that is really quite fascinating in terms of.
And how do you see that playing out? To what end?
Well, it will reinterpret physics. It will reinterpret the reality of physics. It's a different form of. It goes beyond Einstein. It goes beyond into realms and there's the possibility of 0-point energy. I mean, it gets into woo-woo, but maybe it isn't woo-woo. Maybe it isn't.
No. So many things that were considered woo-woo are turning out. Weinstein says that we've wasted a lot of time, 40 years or so, on string theory and all this abstract stuff.
I would agree with him on that.
I think I'm beginning to. Yeah, I really am.
But we've only had electricity since 1750.
Yeah.
And I mean, tried anyway. That's There's but so anyway. But no, I that's back to this new story, new realities. I mean, there are different ways what we're moving into, new world views. I think the group, the New Paradigm Institute, Danny Sheehan and Ubiquity University.
I'll have to put some links for this in the description for the viewers. So New
they're
Paradigm Institute.
New Paradigm Institute and Ubiquity University. Jim Garrison is with president for Ubiquity University. They're doing some good work. I mean, they're right out front there.
Is it written in terms that most lay people can understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a community effort. Ubiquity University and New Paradigm Institute. I mean, there's of course then there's also noetic sciences. There's so much. I mean, that's part of there's too much.
There's too much data.
Yeah,
it's how you bring it down and make some sort of sense of it that's realistic. Okay, thanks, Jonathan. But let's finish on the UAP thing that's going on right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you been watching it? Have you been involved in it? Have you been,
Okay. I mean, it's interesting that, speaking of language changing, there's UFO,
ATIP, and and all this stuff.
But there's a couple of things happening. I mean, there's UFO, there was UAP, which was originally unidentified aerial phenomena, but now it's unidentified anomalous phenomena. And of course, now there's unidentified Richard Dolan's coming out with this new book on, I'll be very interested to get that, those that are flying in water.
Well, Darcy Weir, that I made the Crop Circle documentary with a few years ago,
he did too.
He's done one,
Yeah, so there's that whole thing, but then there's, balls of light, there's plasma, there's how that language is all changing. Now, what is, on what level do you look at this? Do you look at this from a nation state, or is it simply what the government, or I don't think they really understand what's going on. I think there's something much more than, there's a lot, but in terms of what is going on collectively, there is a law that says that by the 18th or 19th of October of this year, all of the national security agencies are to have all of their information digitized and given to the National Archives. We'll see what this, but the fact of the matter is, disclosure's already happened. There's just too much evidence, and there's too many abductions. There's Linda.
Yeah.
It's.
Well, we were in Rio together, weren't we?
Yeah. And she's. So it's not. I think it's not a matter of disclosure anymore. It's a revelation. What is being revealed in terms of this new reality, these new paradigm, this new, the new human species. What is, and I don't know, but I think that's where the excitement.
Yeah, for me, so when I was in Mexico, the Pentagon Papers had been released, so I went to Mexico 2020, just before the pandemic kicked off, when I moved there. And as you know, I'd worked for Jaime from 2008. Years.
Yeah. Speaking of that, I need, in terms of Jaime, this book just came out, the Billy Meyer.
He's done loads of work with him. He interviewed Billy,
Yeah. I mean, that's all 75, 76. That's all
so much of it's come true.
Yeah.
Incredible.
And he's written the foreword to that. The Pleiades. It's here.
It's
how do we humans among ourselves? How do we communicate with
this manner? That's a whole other question. But what I was going to say is that whilst the Pentagon Papers, I interviewed Chrissy Newton. Chrissy Newton was she was the one that released the story of David Grush being the whistleblower. So Leslie Keane and Blumenthal were the journalists that went to the Washington Post. Washington Post said, no, we don't want to run the story. So they went to the debrief on Chrissy Newton's show, Rebelliously Curious, and they told the story about David Grush. And then since then, we've had the congressional hearings and, all that, right? But whilst I was in Mexico, part of my job there was taking... So the CIA dumped all of their archives, and they made it very complicated for but they basically dumped pretty much everything that they had. And one of the journalists there called Ruben Viatoro was going through it with another guy called Alice, I've forgotten his name. Getting old, forgetting names these days. They were wading through this stuff and bringing up, you know, stories where, you know, there'd be an encounter or you know, a crashed craft or something would happen in one country or another, and the you know, police officers that had witnessed it, police officers that had turned up, and it was all documented. And then very quickly an airplane would turn up from the United States, and they'd recover stuff and take it straight away. And it seemed like the US had the major card in all of this, right? Whenever there was an incident worldwide, no matter where, this agency of whoever they were that's connected to the CIA turned up, dealt with the propaganda that was surrounding it if there were witnesses, dealt with the recovery of any materials, dealt with, right? And these stories, Jonathan, were so much more earth-shattering than what was coming out and has been coming out over the last 7 years since the New York Times article with the Pentagon Papers, right? So I was watching these two stories play out. The one that came out in 2017, you know, giving us the Pentagon Papers, Tic Tacs and David Fravor and stuff. That was kind of, you know, very decontextualized, black and white little blips, and right, and then at the same time as I'm listening to all that happening, which basically gave people permission to start talking about this stuff, really, that had been frightened to before. And then at the same time, I'm translating Spanish show that's being put on with this searching through the archives into English, and I'm going, bloody hell, these stories are far more, and they're official, they're coming out of the CIA, right? But we're not hearing about any of this stuff. It's been put out on Jaime's show in Spanish, right? And and so there are these two narratives going along. One's incredibly like, boom. And so the reason I say all of that is because Gary Nolan goes on Tucker Carlson and says, the CIA came to me in 2014 and said, look, you know, we've got these crafts that have interacted with some people. We need you to analyse them. And he says, yeah, these people have been affected by some kind of radiation, or there's something that's affected them. But since then, he's now talking about neurodivergence, where he's talking about the people that get abducted or the people that get close encounters seem to have a different structure to their brain than others, right? And that not only that these people are seeking out mates unconsciously and having children that have this mutation with their brains that are different, and all of these people seem to be at the front when there's encounters to be had with these other than human intelligences, right, as you put it. What do you make of all of that?
It's an extremely sophisticated hybridization program.
Is that what you think?
It's a psychic. I mean, if they're impacting neural, you know, brain, they're not just impacting DNA in the body, but they're impacting ways of thinking. I mean, they're rearranging brain tissue or whatever. You know, it's that interplay between some form of probably electromagnetic and you know, neurons.
What, some sort of technology that's changing us? Is that what you're saying? You think?
I mean, that. Well, we can be scientists here and say that may be a hypothesis, but I don't know what it is. But there is enough evidence. I mean, look at all the abduction cases that Linda's covered, and I mean, there's a
John
huge
Mack.
amount.
I mean,
and you know, all of. So
the Ariel school, the Westall incident that I was fascinated with. Barbara Lamb.
Right, but all of that still needs some good discernment and conversation.
Certainly.
Because and some of that can get mythological, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not a matter of if, but it's more a matter of how this will happen.
Wouldn't that be taking away our free will, Jonathan, if they would like?
Well, yeah. Now, this you need to take a look at what Reed Summers and Vian Summers, the Allies of Humanity. He's doing a course at Ubiquity, and he has some really good things. I mean, his father had some major downloads, and some of the stuff has been channeled, but he has a very good assessment of this. He thinks it's intervention of some kind, and that's the question: is this all good, or is this all? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? In terms of, but we will be encountering. And we have encountered, many people have encountered already. I mean, look at the Billy Myers, I mean, look at Bonnie, and I mean, there's so much, we don't need more data.
No.
No, we don't need more data.
But I mean, if we're being altered, or let's say evolution is naturally altering us in a way to adapt to being ready to communicate with these other than human, to use your phrase.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we've already been adapted with our cell phones. How has that adaptation affected our lives?
Right.
And starting, I mean,
well, I'm sure there's plenty of people who say that's getting in the way of stuff, really.
Yeah. But I mean, as long as we're conscious, I think the real task is to be aware, have a conscious awareness of the evolution. I mean, that's where comes the conversation, the reflection. We don't necessarily just want to result to stimulus response. I mean, we want to participate in this story of our engagement, our participation with the cosmos.
Or pay attention to our current participation that's happening.
Sure.
We always think of evolution as like Darwin back in the day on the Galapagos Islands, but it's happening to us right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is the point, isn't it? And paying attention to that.
Yeah.
Is what we're talking about. Just like paying attention to the evolution of language, it's happening now in the way it's changing. It's interesting.
And again, this is where, and to participate with that on many levels, both a conscious level as well as an unconscious level, be able to be sensitive and aware of what might, because the unconscious makes a lot of choices for us. I mean, we're not always making conscious choices.
No.
Conscious decisions, but
we like to think we are, but most of our stuff, I would say a larger percentage of what we do on a daily basis is being made for us unconsciously. But we think that we're making all the choices, and it's only when you look back and you go, well, why did I do that? Why did I think that? That analysis.
And this is why it's really important. I feel it's important to record one's dreams, keep a record, and create some memory for it. And then share them and talk with them with other people, because to try to interpret your own dream alone is like trying to give yourself a back rub. So, but a lot of information there. And then too, what's fascinating is in these, where there is community, where there is shared awareness, that can be a very receptive area. Some people refer to it as we space. But there's a very interesting group too called cosmicconnectors.org, cosmicconnectors.org. They have some good information that might be of value to your listeners.
Okay, I'll try and find the link. Connectors.org, connectors. Okay.
Yeah, cosmicconnectors.org. And I mean, there's so much stuff, but that's what I'm dealing with, is how to sort through, how to just, there's just so much.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? Yeah. It's like the internet. There's just, I mean, I pile up books at the moment. I've got so many, it's when do I get the time to, I mean, you make the best you can. I mean, the only way that I would be able to start.
You see my pile here?
Yeah. I thinned out. When I moved to Mexico, you wouldn't believe how many books I got rid of. I actually can't find some of them now. I left the good ones with my son, but but I picked up.
Not only then, but you got them on Kindle.
This one.
Oh yeah.
I haven't read it yet. I've just picked it up. So I've got.
I met her at was it in California quite a few years ago. And said, Veronica, you got to come see this. And she did. She came to England and.
Oh, so I watched her presentation. Karen sent me her presentation recently. I'm going to get her on the show, but I want to read the book first, and and that's what I'm saying. Really, is like, I don't want to bring guests on until I'm really prepared. I've got as best as I can be. She'll be a great guest, I think, because
she will be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's good.
Jonathan, it's been great.
So,
We've almost at 2 hours. Is there anything you want to say before we wrap this up? Is there?
Watch your dreams and pray with them. I think that's and again, how to proceed in a civil in a civil way. People refer to ETC, etc. I always refer to them as extraterrestrial civilizations.
Yeah, very good.
So there's more. There's a lot more coming, and I think we need to be consciously, intelligently aware of what and maintain our human sovereignty. Human to human.
Yeah, I like to sort of quote our dear friend Michael Glickman.
Mm-hmm.
I learnt many things from him, and one of them was it's only certainty that makes us go to war with each other.
Yeah.
And so when we actually acknowledge that we can't really be certain about very much at all, then all we can do is have a good chat.
Mm-hmm.
And having a good chat like we've just had.
Yeah.
There'll be things, I'm sure, that my listeners will pick up here that will and send their minds off into different directions to go and look at things other than what we've said. And
spread the chat.
Spread the chat. Yeah, absolutely.
But be able to listen, because sometimes chat gets into chatter.
Yeah.
So,
There's something I quoted. I can't remember. I gave a podcast recently to. I think I was a guest on Peter Robbins. The great Peter Robbins. It's coming out, I think, in a week or two of the show. It was good interview. He's good.
Yeah.
He managed to draw things out of me that I hadn't even. When you've been interviewed by someone who knows what they're doing. When they get you to start going, God, I hadn't thought of that, and he did it. Anyway. Oh God, I've said that now. I've forgotten where my chain of thought was.
Peter Robbins was interviewing you.
Yeah.
And we were talking about chat.
Yeah. It's gone. It'll come back.
That's what happens.
That's what happens. Because I got so into like what he was saying. Oh, I remember. So it was if you go on TED Talks and look up, search how to communicate, how to speak and communicate and get your message across to people, millions and millions and millions of views. If you look at how to be a good listener, hardly any.
Yeah.
Priorities, huh? So I think what you just said there is very relevant. We need to, because the big part of the communication is to not hear but to listen.
Well, that's where the David Bohm stuff.
Right. I got to get that. I got to get into that book. I've had it so long, and I haven't. Yeah.
But the Bohm dialogue, it's not as we really always think of dialogue, but it's deep listening, because that's really where we're at. We need to listen to the other than human intelligences. What are they saying? And they're speaking to us, I think, in the crop circle formation process. That whole thing. And they're going for the long run too. I mean, they're on a very different timeline than the daily news.
They really are, aren't they? It's a long communication, a long narrative that's played the long game. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, they're at Stonehenge and Maybury and Great Serpent Mound.
True that.
This could go on and on. We need to do this.
That was
again.
a great way to end it. Yeah, we do indeed, Jonathan. Thank you so much.
Maybe do a round table sometime. Maybe get a couple other folks, and we could do a multi. A trilogue or a quadrilogue.
Well, absolutely. I can. This platform allows me to get more than one guest on, so that's a really good idea. Yeah, we should do that with Karen and Scott and some of the others. Yeah, Jeff Fitzpatrick's coming on in the next week or so. We've got Jeff coming. So yeah. That'd be a really good idea. We'll do that. Let's get that penciled in. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me. This has been fantastic.
Bless you. Yeah, good.
So we'll end it there and say
to be continued.
To be continued. Yeah. Thank you very much.
See you later.
See you later.